The emerald sun barely pierced through the perpetually polluted skies of Cygnus X7. Kale didn't mind. He had long since gotten used to the dim glow that bathed the sprawling industrial graveyard in sickly hues. The abandoned mining planet was now little more than a dumping ground for broken technology and forgotten machinery. A perfect place for someone who wanted to be forgotten themselves. Kale adjusted his mechanical right arm, the ancient servos whining in protest. The outdated prosthetic was a constant reminder of his past, much like the nightmares that still jolted him awake most nights. He had been a battle engineer once, respected and decorated, until that last mission. The details were still vivid after all these years. The ambush, the screams of his unit as they were systematically eliminated, the searing pain as his arm was severed, and the crushing weight of failure as he alone escaped with his life. Now, at 43, he lived alone in an abandoned military bunker, trading scavenged parts with shady junk dealers and repairing enough technology to keep himself alive. People left him alone, which was exactly how he preferred it. Machines were predictable, fixable, and didn't leave you to die when things got difficult. The scrap yard stretched before him, mountains of twisted metal and broken dreams under the diseased sky. Kale checked his scanner again. Somewhere in this sector, his device had detected traces of a rare power cell, the kind that could fetch enough credits to keep him supplied for months. He adjusted the settings and followed the faint signal deeper into the industrial complex. The abandoned factory loomed ahead, its once proud structure now a skeleton of rusted metal and crumbling concrete. Kale's scanner led him through a labyrinth of collapsed machinery and toppled assembly lines. The signal was getting stronger. He ducked under a fallen beam and pushed aside a panel of corroded metal, revealing an old ventilation shaft. That's when he heard it, a faint shuffling sound that definitely wasn't from the local wildlife. Cygnus X7's toxic atmosphere had killed off most native species long ago, leaving only the hardiest of scavenger rodents and insects. Kale drew his ion pistol from its holster, approaching cautiously. His scanner indicated the power source was just ahead, but the sound didn't match any mechanical signature he knew. He aimed his light into the ventilation shaft. A pair of large amber eyes reflected back at him, blinking rapidly in the sudden brightness. Kale stepped back, startled. Those weren't animal eyes. They were intelligent, frightened, and unmistakably humanoid. "Come out," he commanded, keeping his voice steady and his pistol raised. Slowly, the figure didn't move. Kale sighed. He wasn't in the mood for complications. Whatever, or whoever, was hiding there was between him and the power cells he needed. He could simply leave and find another source. This planet was littered with valuable components for those who knew where to look. He turned to go, lowering his weapon. The memory of his fallen comrades flashed briefly in his mind, faces full of terror as he failed to save them. He cursed under his breath and turned back toward the shaft. "Look," he said, trying to soften his naturally gruff voice. "I'm not going to hurt you, but it's not safe here. The structure is unstable." After a long moment, there was movement from within the shadows. A thin figure emerged cautiously from a vent. Kale's light revealed a young girl, perhaps 15 or 16 by human standards. Her skin was a pale blue that seemed to emit a faint luminescence, and those large amber eyes regarded him with a mixture of fear and defiance. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her body painfully thin, and a nasty gash ran along her left arm. Kale recognized her species immediately, Xylosian. They were rare this far out in the galaxy, known for their natural affinity with energy fields and their distinctive bioluminescent skin. What was one doing here, especially one so young? "Are you alone?" he asked, scanning the area for potential threats. The girl didn't respond, but took a defensive stance, looking ready to bolt back into the ventilation shaft at the slightest provocation. Kale holstered his weapon slowly and reached into his pack. The girl flinched but remained where she was, watching his every move with those unervingly perceptive eyes. He pulled out a ration bar and held it out toward her. "Food," he said simply. "You look like you need it." Her gaze shifted between his face and the offered food, suspicion evident in her expression. Finally, hunger won out. She darted forward, snatched the bar from his hand, and retreated several steps before tearing into it ravenously. Kale watched her eat, noticing the way she favored her injured arm and how she kept glancing toward the exit. She was a runaway, that much was obvious. But from what? There were no settlements on Cygnus. X7, no legitimate operations that would employ a Xylosian teenager. "What's your name?" he asked when she had finished the ration bar. She stared at him blankly, then spoke in a language Kale only partially recognized, an ancient dialect of the galactic common tongue, heavily accented. "Great," he muttered. A language barrier was the last thing he needed. He tapped his chest. "Kale," he said clearly, then pointed at her questioningly. She hesitated before responding. "Lyra," she said softly, her voice melodic despite its weariness. "Lyra," he repeated, "that wound needs attention. I have supplies at my bunker." He gestured to her injured arm. She glanced at her arm as if noticing the wound for the first time, then looked back at Kale with uncertainty. Kale knew he should walk away. Taking in a traumatized alien teenager was not part of his carefully constructed solitary existence. She would be trouble, a responsibility he didn't want or need. Yet as she stood there, injured and alone in this wasteland, he couldn't bring himself to abandon her. "Your choice," he said, turning to leave. "Stay here or come with me. Either way, I'm going." He walked slowly toward the exit, listening carefully. After a moment, he heard the soft sound of footsteps following at a cautious distance. He didn't look back, giving her the space to change her mind if she wanted to. By the time they reached the entrance to the complex, the dim sunlight was fading even further, signaling the approach of night. On Cygnus X7, darkness brought dangers of its own. Extreme cold, predatory scavengers emerging from their dens, and the occasional desperate salvager willing to kill for a decent find. Kale led the way across the scrapyard, navigating the treacherous terrain with practiced ease. He occasionally glanced back to make sure Lyra was still following. She moved with surprising grace despite her condition, carefully mimicking his path through the metal maze. The bunker was half buried in the side of a hill, its entrance concealed by strategic piles of seemingly worthless junk. To the untrained eye, it was just another heap of scrap. Kale unlocked the hidden security panel, and the reinforced door slid open with a hiss. Lyra hesitated at the threshold, peering into the dimly lit interior with obvious apprehension. "It's safer than out there," Kale said, gesturing to the darkening landscape. After a moment's contemplation, she stepped inside, her eyes darting around to take in every detail of her new surroundings. The bunker was spartanly furnished, but meticulously organized. One section served as Kale's living quarters with a cot, a small cooking area, and basic amenities. The larger portion functioned as his workshop, filled with salvage technology in various states of repair, tools arranged with military precision, and workbenches illuminated by adjustable lights. Kale closed and locked the door behind them, activating the security system with a few practice keystrokes. He moved to a cabinet and retrieved a medkit, motioning for Lyra to sit on a stool near one of the workbenches. "Let me see your arm," he said, keeping his movements slow and predictable. She sat reluctantly, extending her injured arm with obvious distrust. The gash was deeper than he'd initially thought, but thankfully not infected. His field medical training would be sufficient. As he cleaned and dressed the wound, Kale observed her more closely. Despite her frail appearance, there was a resilience about her. She didn't flinch when he applied the antiseptic, though he knew it must sting. Her luminescent skin glowed slightly brighter when he worked on the most painful areas, the only indication of her discomfort. "How did you end up here?" he asked, though he doubted she would understand or answer. To his surprise, she spoke in her accented version of the old galactic tongue, gesturing with her free hand to emphasize certain points. Kale caught fragments, words that sounded like ship, escape, and what he was fairly certain translated to slave traders. A grim picture began to form in his mind. Illegal trafficking operations occasionally used Cygnus X7 as a drop point or emergency landing zone. Its abandoned status and lack of official oversight made it ideal for criminal activities. A slave ship must have crashed or made an emergency landing, and somehow Lyra had escaped during the chaos. After finishing with her wound, Cale prepared a simple meal from his limited supplies. Lyra ate cautiously at first, then with increasing eagerness as her hunger reasserted itself. When she had finished, exhaustion seemed to overtake her all at once. Her eyelids grew heavy, and her luminescence dimmed noticeably. Cale retrieved a spare blanket and pointed to a cleared area near the heating unit. "You can sleep there," he said. "It's warm." She nodded in understanding, taking the blanket and curling up in the indicated spot. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into the rhythm of deep sleep. Cale watched her for a moment, wondering what he had gotten himself into. Tomorrow, he would have to figure out what to do with her. The logical choice would be to contact someone who could help her get off planet. Though who exactly that might be, he wasn't sure. His own contacts were limited to junk dealers and black market traders, hardly the kind of people he'd trust with a vulnerable Xylosian girl. For now, though, she was safe, and that would have to be enough. He returned to his workbench, tinkering with a broken communicator until his own exhaustion drove him to his cot for a few hours of fitful sleep. The following days established an uneasy routine. Cale found an old translation device among his salvage and repaired it enough to facilitate basic communication. Through fragmented conversations, he confirmed his suspicions about Lyra's past. She had been captured by slavers during a raid on her colony's ship, held captive for months, and eventually brought to Cygnus X-7 when the slavers' vessel developed critical engine problems. During the emergency landing, she had managed to slip away in the confusion and had been hiding in the industrial ruins for nearly 2 weeks before Cale found her. Her memories of her homeworld and family were hazy, whether from trauma or simply the passage of time. Cale couldn't determine. What was clear was her constant fear of being recaptured, causing her to startle at every unexpected sound and regard Cale's occasional visitors with terror. These visitors, primarily junk dealers with whom Cale traded, began to take notice of his new companion despite his efforts to keep Lyra hidden during their transactions. Most were merely curious, but one in particular, a hulking four-armed salvager named Grok, displayed an unsettling interest that set Cale's combat-honed instincts on edge. "Unusual pet you've got there, Cale," Grok rumbled during one exchange, his beady eyes shifting toward the workshop area where Lyra had hastily concealed herself behind a panel of equipment. "Xylosian, ain't it? Worth a pretty credit to the right buyer, I'd wager." Cale's mechanical hand clenched involuntarily. "She's not for sale, and she's not a topic for discussion." Grok's lipless mouth stretched into what passed for a smile among his species. "Course not. Just making conversation." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "But you ought to know there are folks asking questions about a missing Xylosian. Folks who don't ask nicely. I appreciate the warning," Cale replied evenly, though his mind was already calculating escape routes and defensive measures. "Now, unless you're interested in these power converters, our business is concluded." After Grok's departure, Cale strengthened the bunker's security systems and began teaching Lyra basic self-defense techniques. She proved to be an apt pupil, quick to learn and determined to master each lesson. Her natural energy-sensing abilities gave her an uncanny awareness of her surroundings that compensated for her lack of physical strength. As weeks stretched into months, Lyra's presence slowly transformed the bunker and, more subtly, Cale himself. Her initial terror gradually gave way to cautious curiosity, then to active engagement with her new environment. She began helping in the workshop, first with simple tasks like sorting components, then with increasingly complex repairs as she demonstrated a natural affinity for technology. Cale found himself explaining engineering principles to her, first in halting phrases through the translator, then more fluently as her grasp of the common language improved. He was surprised by how quickly she grasped concepts that had taken him years to master. Her Xylosian ability to sense energy fields gave her an intuitive understanding of how power flowed through systems. She could often identify malfunctions by touch alone, feeling the disruption in the energy pattern. "How does this work?" she would ask, holding up components and watching attentively as Kale explained their function. Her amber eyes would focus intently, her skin glowing slightly brighter when she understood a particularly complex concept. The glow was fascinating to Kale, a visual representation of thought itself, fluctuating with her emotions and concentration. He found himself talking more than he had in years, drawn out by her questions and genuine interest. Occasionally, to his own surprise, he would catch himself sharing fragments of his past, sanitized versions of his military experiences or technical challenges he had overcome. He never mentioned the failed mission or his lost comrades, but sometimes he would fall silent mid-sentence, ambushed by a memory, and Lyra would simply wait, her perceptive eyes seeing more than he intended to reveal. As Lyra's confidence grew, so did her contributions to their shared existence. She improved the efficiency of the bunker's power systems using her intuitive understanding of energy flows. She repaired and enhanced Kale's mechanical arm, eliminating the whine that had plagued it for years and increasing its sensitivity to nearly match his organic hand. She began preparing simple meals from their limited supplies, experimenting with ways to make the bland rations more palatable. Kale observed these changes with mixed emotions. He appreciated the improvements to his living conditions and the unexpectedly comfortable companionship they had developed. Yet part of him remained guarded, aware that this arrangement was temporary. Lyra deserved better than a life in hiding on a toxic junkyard planet with a broken-down ex-soldier. Eventually, he would need to find a way to get her somewhere safe, somewhere she could have a real future. These thoughts preoccupied him as he returned from a salvage run one evening, having left Lyra secured in the bunker as he always did when venturing out alone. The twilight was deepening, casting long shadows across the wasteland. His scanner had picked up unusual movement patterns near the bunker's perimeter, setting his nerves on edge. He approached cautiously, using the junk piles for cover. When he reached his observation point, his worst fears were confirmed. Grok and 3 associates were circling the bunker, clearly searching for a way past the security systems. One was carrying scanning equipment, another a set of heavy cutting tools. Kale's military training took over. He circled wide, using the terrain to mask his approach, and reached the bunker's hidden emergency entrance. Once inside, he found Lyra monitoring the security feeds, her expression tense but focused. "They arrived 20 minutes ago," she reported, her common speech now fluent though still accented. "I activated the secondary shields as you taught me, but their scanner is sophisticated. They will find a weakness eventually." Kale moved quickly to the weapons locker, retrieving his old military-grade rifle and a smaller pistol for Lyra. "We've prepared for this," he reminded her, though his stomach twisted at the thought of putting her in danger. "Remember the defensive positions we practiced?" She nodded, taking the pistol with steady hands. In the 18 months since he'd found her, she had grown taller and stronger, no longer the frightened child from the ventilation shaft. Her movements were confident as she took position near the main entrance, where the first breach would likely occur. "Why help me?" she asked suddenly, her amber eyes meeting his with an intensity that caught him off guard. "All this time, all this risk, why?" The question struck him like a physical blow. He had never fully articulated his reasons, even to himself. Was it the guilt over his fallen comrades that drove him to save this one life? A desperate bid for redemption? Or something simpler, the basic human impulse to protect someone vulnerable? Before he could formulate an answer, the security system blared a warning. Grok's team had begun cutting through the outer door. "We'll discuss philosophy later," Kale said, positioning himself with a clear line of fire. "For now, stay low and remember your training." The attack came in stages. First, they disabled the external sensors with an electromagnetic pulse that would have shut down all the bunker systems, if not for Lyra's modifications that isolated the interior grid. Then came the cutting tools, slicing through the reinforced door with surprising efficiency. Kale waited, letting them commit to the breach before revealing his defensive preparations. As the first attacker pushed through the partially cut door, Kale activated the trap he had installed months ago, an electrical discharge that incapacitated the intruder instantly. The second assailant was more cautious, but fell to Kale's precisely aimed shot. Grok and his remaining associate retreated temporarily, regrouping outside. "They're circling around," Lyra reported, monitoring the remaining external camera. "Try for the maintenance access." Kale nodded grimly. "That's where they'll meet your surprise." Lyra had modified the maintenance access with her unique talents, creating an energy feedback loop that would respond to unauthorized entry. When Grok attempted to bypass the lock, the system delivered a surge that should have repelled the attackers. Instead, there was an explosion that shook the entire bunker. Kale realized too late that Grok must have been carrying energy weapons with unstable power cells. The feedback had triggered a catastrophic overload. The blast tore through the bunker's sidewall, sending debris flying. Kale saw a jagged piece of metal hurtling toward Lyra and reacted without thinking. He threw himself into its path, feeling a searing pain as it sliced through his side. The world narrowed to a tunnel of pain and fading light. He was dimly aware of shouting, the sound of Lyra's pistol firing repeatedly, and then silence. Cool hands touched his face, and amber eyes filled his fading vision. "Kale, stay with me." Lyra's voice seemed to come from very far away. Her hands moved to his wounded side, applying pressure. "I need you to stay awake. Focus on my voice." He tried to respond, but could only manage a groan. The pain was overwhelming, darkness encroaching from the edges of his consciousness. He felt a strange warmth spreading from Lyra's hands, something beyond normal body heat. Through his haze, he realized her skin was glowing more intensely than he had ever seen, pulsing with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. "I'm channeling energy to slow the bleeding," she explained, her voice strained with concentration. "It's a Xylosian healing technique. Not very strong in me, but it should help until I can treat you properly." Kale drifted in and out of consciousness as Lyra worked, applying the medical skills he had taught her and supplementing them with her own abilities. At one point, he thought he heard her speaking softly in her native language, words he couldn't understand, but that sounded like a prayer or perhaps a confession. "I can't lose you," she whispered in common speech, her voice breaking. "You're all I have. More than that. She hesitated, then continued in a rush of words she clearly thought he couldn't hear. "I love you, not as a guardian or a teacher. I know you see me as a child you rescued, but I'm not that frightened girl anymore. I've grown, I've changed, and my feelings have changed too. I don't expect you to understand or return these feelings. I know there are too many complications, too many differences between us, but I needed to say it, even if only to the air around us." She fell silent, continuing her ministrations with trembling hands. Kale, hovering at the edge of consciousness, absorbed her words with shock. Through the pain and confusion, a part of him recognized the truth he had been avoiding. His own feelings had evolved in ways he hadn't permitted himself to acknowledge. The protectiveness, the pride in her accomplishments, the comfort in her presence. They had grown into something deeper, something he had refused to name out of guilt and a sense of impropriety. He wanted to respond, to tell her that he understood more than she realized, but darkness claimed him before he could form words. Kale awoke to the soft hum of medical equipment. His side was bandaged tightly, and the sharp pain had dulled to a persistent ache. The bunker was dimly lit, emergency lights casting long shadows across the damaged interior. He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as pain flared through his abdomen. "Don't move," Lyra's voice came from nearby. She appeared at his side, looking exhausted but relieved. "The wound was deep. I sealed it as best I could, but you need to stay still." "Grok," he managed to ask, his voice raspy from disuse. "Dead," she replied flatly. "Him and one other. The explosion killed his associate. He came in after, and I—" She looked away. "I had no choice." Kale reached out, taking her hand in his organic one. "You did what was necessary. What about the bunker? Structural integrity is at 60%. I've sealed the breach temporarily, but we'll need significant repairs." She hesitated. "Or we could leave. The ship you've been working on in the hidden hangar. Is it operational? Kale considered this. The small transport vessel he had been slowly restoring over the past year was nearly complete. He had intended it as a means to get Lyra off-planet eventually, though he hadn't fully admitted this to himself until now. Almost, he replied. The navigation system needs calibration, and the life support could use reinforcement for longer journeys, but it could fly. An uncomfortable silence fell between them. Kale knew they needed to address her confession, but uncertainty held him back. How much did he actually remember through the haze of pain? How much had been a dream or hallucination? Lyra solved the dilemma by addressing it directly, her amber eyes meeting his with characteristic courage. You heard what I said while treating you. It wasn't a question. Kale nodded slowly. I don't expect anything, she continued, her luminescence fluctuating with emotion. I know how you found me, the age difference, the complications. I know you see yourself as my protector. I did, Kale admitted. At first. He paused, organizing his thoughts. But you've changed, Lyra. You're not the same person I found in that ventilation shaft. You've grown into someone remarkable, skilled, intelligent, brave. He gestured to his bandaged side, apparently capable of keeping me alive, which is no small feat. A small smile flickered across her face before fading. But I'm still struggling with what this means, he said honestly. My feelings for you have evolved. I care for you deeply, more than I've allowed myself to care for anyone since. He trailed off, memories of his lost unit flashing through his mind. For a very long time, but I've been your guardian, your teacher. Crossing that line feels wrong, she supplied, her expression guarded. Kale considered this. Not wrong exactly. Complicated. I'm 25 years older than you. I'm human. You're Xylosian. I'm a broken-down ex-soldier with more emotional damage than I care to admit. You deserve better than a life in hiding with someone like me. Lyra's luminescence intensified, her expression growing determined. Shouldn't that be my choice? I've had so few choices in my life, Kale. I was taken from my home, treated as property, fled for my life. You gave me safety, yes, but more importantly, you gave me agency. You taught me to defend myself, to understand this world, to make my own way. She leaned closer, her free hand hovering near his face as if afraid to touch him. I choose you, not out of gratitude or dependency, but because of who we've become together. Age is just a number, species just biology. What matters is what we build between us. Her words struck a chord in him, challenging the barriers he had erected. Still, doubt lingered. And what happens when you meet others of your kind? When you have the opportunity for a normal life, away from this toxic wasteland? There are no guarantees in any life, she replied softly. I might find my people someday, or I might not. But I know what I feel now, and it's real. The question is, what do you feel? Not what you think is proper or appropriate. What does your heart tell you? Kale closed his eyes, allowing himself to face the truth he had been avoiding. When he opened them again, his decision was made. My heart tells me that the thought of you leaving is more painful than this wound ever could be. That you've brought light to my darkness in ways I never expected. That I care for you as more than a ward or student. The word love stuck in his throat. Not because it wasn't true, but because it had been so long since he had allowed himself to feel it, let alone express it. Lyra seemed to understand what remained unspoken. Her luminescence pulsed with joy, bathing them both in gentle blue light. Slowly, giving him every opportunity to pull away, she leaned down and pressed her forehead to his, an intimate gesture among Xylosians that she had once explained to him. Then we face whatever comes next together, she whispered. As equals. The days that followed were focused on recovery and preparation. As Kale's wound healed, they worked together to complete the transport ship's restoration. The attack had made one thing clear. Cygnus X-7 was no longer safe for them. Word would spread about Grok's death, attracting either vengeance from his associates or more opportunistic predators hoping to claim whatever prize had been worth killing for. The question of their destination remained open. There were rumors of Xylosian enclaves in the Outer Rim territories, places where refugees from their scattered species had gathered to preserve their culture. or they could head toward the more cosmopolitan systems of the core, where a human and a Xylosian together might attract less attention among the diverse populations. Their relationship evolved cautiously during this time. The acknowledgement of their mutual feelings had removed one barrier, but others remained. Cale still battled with guilt over what he perceived as a violation of trust. He had been her rescuer, after all. Lyra patiently countered this argument at every turn, reminding him that their current bond had been forged through equal partnership, not the initial rescue. Physical intimacy developed slowly, beginning with simple touches. Her hand on his as they worked side by side, his arm around her shoulders as they reviewed star charts. Each contact carried new significance now, acknowledged rather than suppressed. Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, her luminescence flaring so brightly it had temporarily overloaded the bunker's light sensors, causing them both to laugh in the sudden darkness. Finally, the day of departure arrived. They had salvaged everything of value from the bunker, packed the ship with supplies, and set a course for the outer rim as a starting point. Cale stood at the entrance to their home of the past 2 years, taking a final look at the place that had witnessed so much change. Having second thoughts? Lyra asked, joining him in the doorway. Cale shook his head, just saying goodbye to the past. He flexed his mechanical arm, recently enhanced again by Lyra's skilled modifications. For a long time, this place represented my retreat from life. Now, it just feels like a way station, somewhere we pass through on the way to something else. She smiled, taking his hand, organic and mechanical class together. The future is uncertain, she acknowledged, but that's true no matter where we go or what we do. At least we face it together. Cale nodded, a sense of peace settling over him that he hadn't felt in decades. Whatever challenges awaited them, cultural differences, the ongoing danger from those who might recognize Lyra's value in the slave markets, the practical difficulties of building a life together, they would navigate them as they had everything else, with ingenuity, courage, and the bond that had grown between them. They sealed the bunker for the last time and made their way to the hidden hangar where the transport ship awaited. As the engines hummed to life and the vessel rose from Cygnus X-7's polluted surface, Cale watched the industrial graveyard recede beneath them. The scrap heap planet had given him both his greatest loss and his most unexpected joy. Now it was time to leave it behind. The stars beckoned as they broke atmosphere. Countless possibilities spread before them. Lyra's hand found his on the control panel, her skin glowing with anticipation and hope. "Where to first?" she asked, amber eyes reflecting the starlight. Cale smiled, a genuine expression that had once been rare but was becoming more natural with each passing day. "Wherever we decide." Together, the ship accelerated into the vastness of space, leaving the industrial graveyard behind as they charted a course toward an undefined but promising future.